Hello, this is Dream Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have the words federal agencies are discouraged from using under Trump, posted by CH4Locks, and that's an archive link to the New York Times. Let's see. These words are disappearing in the new Trump administration, and they said, and they add, and the article says, as President Trump seeks to purge the federal government of woke initiatives, agencies have flagged hundreds of words limited or void, according to compilation of government documents. And there are a bunch of words there, like you can see MSM, activism, disability, inclusion, and yeah, I personally don't think that kind of goes against free speech. But with that being said, I remember Stanford University came out with a list not too long ago that was pretty much the same thing, but the progressive equivalent of it. They said, "Oh, you can't call people Americans anymore." Yeah, it was 2 years ago. I shared it to link to the NY Post article on the same subreddit. Stanford releases guide against harmful language, including the word American, from the New York Post. And yeah, that just goes to show you how, I guess you could make the argument that's not the state, but it's like most things, it's a both sides issue. Everyone says, oh, the other side gets offended so easily, but everyone takes offense to, and it seems like the vast majority of people take offense to anything that goes against the narrative these days. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Congresswoman Lauren Boebert thinks the church is supposed to direct the government and is tired of the separation of church and state junk from Donald Key, and that's a cross post from the religious fruitcake subreddit. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for all the people who are pushing to integrate the church and the state more. I think we need to have a separation of church and state, but I think the big problem today is for pretty much everyone, the state has essentially become the church. Increasingly, people feel like the state is there to enforce morality and make sure everyone is good all the time. Well, in reality, I would say that's the job of the church. The job of the state is to, just govern and enforce the law. And yeah, I personally think, I can see an argument that ultimately, if you believe that if you believe in something, you should use the state to enforce your morality. But with that being said, I personally don't think that's the libertarian argument. I think the libertarian argument is let everyone do whatever they want to as long as they're not hurting anyone else. And yeah, so that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have U.S. court temporarily blocks effort to deport Gaza protest leader from BBC.com, posted by Anarcho Federation, and they added, remember when J.D. Vance tried to scold Europeans that their freedom of speech was under threat and attack? Usually that's code for I think Germany's anti-Nazism laws are too much, but whatever the case, it's not good throwing stones from glass houses. Whenever the media or politicians try to portray protesters as anti-American scum, they rarely mean anti-American government dissent must be crushed. It's never usually hatred from Americans, it's hatred and criticism from the government, something all Americans should cherish. And I'd agree with that. I think, freedom of speech should be absolute, and yeah, and Trump and the MAGA crew might say they're for freedom of speech, but the second they rule that you're anti-Semitic, suddenly they think your speech should be restricted. And yeah, ultimately, I think we need to support people for freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is always going to be under attack. When it's the MAGA right who's attacking it, they'll say, "Oh, you can't do that because it's anti-Semitism." When it's the woke left doing it, they'll say, "Oh, you can't say that because it constitutes misinformation or hate or hate speech." And that's why I think you got to support freedom of speech, even if, the narrative might be against it, because people say, oh, I'm an independent thinker, but then the narrative comes knocking and they always bow down before whatever the narrative is. So yeah, you gotta support freedom of speech, whoever's under attack from the MAGAs or the wokes, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Rodrigo Duterte, Philippines ex-leader Duterte, arrested on an International Criminal Court warrant over drug killings from BBC.com by Flimsy L5563. And yeah, I personally think that Duterte is kind of an authoritarian asshole with how he used the state to kill people for drug trafficking. But with that being said, I definitely do think this is kind of an authoritarianism, using authoritarianism to justify arresting an authoritarian, especially since the Philippines is not a current signatory to the International Criminal Court, and that's that's not good. That's not. I don't think that's very good. When the International Criminal Court thinks it can police countries that aren't even signatory to it. I think it's interesting how a lot of the woke progressives say, "Oh, Elon Musk is unelected," yet they seem completely fine with the unelected International Criminal Court because the Orange Man says it was bad, so it must be good. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have free market from Dapper Dame 89, and that's a crossroads from the Boycott United States subreddit, and that's the truth from Donald Trump. To Republicans, conservatives, and all great Americans, Elon Musk is putting it on the line in order to help our nation, and he's doing a fantastic job, but the radical left lunatics, as they often do, are trying to illegally inclusively boycott Tesla, one of the world's great automakers, and Elon's baby, in order to attack and do harm to Elon and everything he stands for. They tried to do it to me at the 2024 presidential ballot box, but how did that work out? In any event, I'm going to buy a brand new Tesla tomorrow morning as a show of confidence and support for Elon Musk, a truly great American. Why should he be punished for putting his tremendous skills to work in order to help make America great again? And yeah, I personally think if people do want to boycott Tesla, I think they should be able to, just because, Donald Trump does or Elon Musk doesn't like it doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to boycott. With that being said, I think people are tired of cancel culture. But with that being said, when it goes the other way, it's not cancel culture. I'm sure if this was, if Kamala won and people were boycotting a woke business, I don't think Kamala might be as openly about saying, "Oh, it's illegal to boycott whatever the woke business is." But the woke progressives of Reddit would still say, "Oh, you shouldn't be boycotting it. They're good. The other side is bad," and because they really think they really have black and white morality like that. A lot of people on social media seem to have black and white morality like that. But regardless, to justify boycotting whatever you want to, but ultimately I think people are tired of all these boycotts and cancel culture, and people just want to move on from 2016 and Orange Man bad and whatever, but it just doesn't seem like that's happening anytime soon. Then we have Trump orders more tariffs on Canada in response to Ontario tax on electricity exports from Trump administration, and that's from theguardian.com by Dr. 07. And yeah, I personally don't think tariffs are good, but ultimately, I don't really think they're good when the U.S. imposes them or when Canada imposes them. I don't think that Canada's retaliatory tariffs are that libertarian either. But Reddit loves it when the side they're on does whatever the side they're against does. And they just see that with, they hate tariffs when Trump does them, but when Canada does them, suddenly they're great. And also, they were fine with tariffs when Biden was president, but now that Trump's president, suddenly they're the worst thing ever. It just really, as I've said in a lot of episodes, it just literally depends who's in the in-group and who's in the out-group for a lot of people these days. Then we have, how many more times can this possibly happen from Ninja Lover, and that's crosspost from the We the Fifth subreddit. And that's the guy from, I think, Watchmen. He says, and he's looking dejected. It's 2020, Donald Trump says Massey should be thrown out of the Republican Party. The Never panel is 2022, Donald Trump says Massey has his complete and total endorsement. Then the Never panel is 2025, Donald Trump says Massey should be thrown out of the Republican Party. And, yeah, ultimately, I think Massey's probably one of the better Republicans, probably one of the most libertarian people in the Congress currently. That's a low bar to clear. I hope Massey was able to run for president over the next cycle or two. But I'm sure that IPAC, the American Israel lobby, will make sure that doesn't happen because that's arguably the most powerful lobby in a city that's chock full of them. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, Elon Musk sparks outrage in Italy over potential $1.6 billion Starlink deal amid cozy rapport with Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni from Variety.com by Ninja Lover, and they added negotiations between Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's right-wing government and Elon Musk's SpaceX over a Starlink deal reportedly worth $1.6 billion are sparking outrage in Italy's parliament. It would be absolutely insane to turn over constant military diplomats to Starlink. Musk has repeatedly threatened to cripple Ukraine by disabling their access. The power and control he personally have over your entire country could be immeasurable. And yeah, I guess I would agree with that. Ultimately, I don't think the government should be making deals with anyone, regardless of any private business. But, big business and big government are kind of inherently intertwined like that. And that's why, I personally don't really care for government at all, because it's an inherent monopoly. If you don't do or don't want to use Starlink, that should be an individual choice. But when the government partners with Starlink, you're pretty much forced to use it. And that's not very libertarian, I feel. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Susan Collins concerned Trump required to follow law and to stop gap spending bill. And that's a quote from CH4Locks, and that's a crosspost from the main subreddit. And that's a section from the Portland Press Herald newspaper. Collins said Democrats' efforts to insert language requiring the president to spend the money is in accordance with the wishes of Congress would effectively kill its chances, calling it a poison pill. When spending bills like this are drafted, the rule in the past has been no poison pills, Collins said. The restrictions Democrats are demanding would be considered poison pill language. And yeah, that's why, I personally don't care for any of these spending bills. But ultimately, those in positions of power will justify what they justify. Ultimately, I don't think the government should be spending any money whatsoever that the people don't consent to. But, the government's going to justify what it justifies regardless. And I'm sure that if this was a Democrat senator saying the same thing for a Democrat president, Reddit would be defending them, but since Susan Collins is a Republican senator defending a Republican president, suddenly it's the worst thing ever. Then we have Trump reading off a goddamn sales pitch to promote Tesla earlier from Donald Key, and that's crosspost from the Facepalm subreddit, and that was him looking at his notes. It looks like he wrote down Tesla pricing, full self-driving, and then he lists all the models and cost. And yeah, that's Donald Trump for you. I remember he did pretty much the same thing. He had a small pad paper when he was getting impeached for the Ukraine stuff, and it said like no quid pro quo, tells Zelensky to do the right thing. And that's just Donald Trump for you. It looks like he needs his notes and that kind of. I don't know if that's just maybe a performative thing or he just needs to help remembering. But regardless, if he wants to advertise Tesla, I think he should be able to. But as I said earlier, I'm kind of tired with big business and big government colluding with each other, and regardless of whether it's a progressive doing it or a more conservative person. Then we have you heard the man boycott Tesla from CDN history student, and that was the truth from Donald Trump mentioned earlier, but it's all whited out except for the lines boycott Tesla, one of the world's lawmakers, and Elon's baby in order to attack and do harm to Elon and everything he stands for. And yeah, ultimately I think people should be able to manipulate images however they feel like. So I think this is okay from a libertarian perspective. As I said earlier, if you want to boycott Tesla, I think you should be able to. With that being said, people are tired of this constant cancel culture and boycott culture, and that's at least my perspective on it. Then we have any Libertarian / Georges in the sub from Kung Fu Panda 45789, and that's a crosspost from the Georges in subreddit. Bullshit taxes equals income, sales, VAT, corporate capital gains, payroll, etc. And that's a meme of a skeleton with a gun. He says, "Hey government, why don't you just tax land instead of all the other bullshit taxes?" And I would agree with that. I personally am against taxation at all, but if we do have a tax, I think the land value tax proposed by Georgism is probably the best one, because ultimately, it's whatever percentage of land people take up, that's ultimately the resources they're using, I would say. So I think that's probably the most justified tax, even if I personally would still be against it. And let's see if there's anything new. Looks like there isn't, so we're going to wrap up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.